Hi everyone, welcome to Campaign's offices here in Hong Kong. We're really delighted to have you here, have these lovely guests joining us, and we're talking about the topic of diversity and tolerance in the marketing communications industry in Asia. And I just want to say a little bit about why we're here. I wrote an article which was based on an interview with a man called Delmas Credle. We published it a few weeks ago. And he was the head of planning at BBDO China for a year, from January 2017 to 2018. And he got in touch with us on Twitter, actually, and told us of a few instances that he'd found at BBDO China where he really felt like he was being discriminated against on grounds of his race and his sexual preferences and his skin color. And we published the article and it had a really strong reaction. So we've actually since published a whole load of people's reactions on our website as well. And I'm going to assume that you've read it, but if you haven't, please go to our website and check out that article and check out the reactions. And because it's given us the kind of opportunity to talk about this topic, which is quite sensitive. It's about diversity in the workplace. And I think we hear a lot that Asia is a very diverse workplace. Everyone's very proud of, lots of different cultures and backgrounds working together. This piece does kind of raise the question that maybe we're missing something. Maybe there are, intolerances and behaviours that shouldn't really be acceptable going on. So please do send us some questions if you'd like. Write them on Facebook, like us, send us anger. We're ready to take it all. We want to make this an open forum for discussion. So I want to introduce my wonderful panel. Thank you all so much for coming in, agreeing to talk about this. So we have Rex Lam, Head of Marketing at Honestbee, Jacqui Barratt, CEO and founder of Salt, and Leo Brems, MD of AdMark Asia Group. Thank you all so much for joining us. You all read the piece, so I'm going to ask, first of all, Rex, why don't you kick off? What did you think when you read it?
Actually, I think I read similar news before. So when expats from the Western culture try to go into mainland China and have quite a lot of cultural shock. So I think later we can discuss in more in-depth. But I did encounter similar cases before.
Yeah. And is that the same? So you work in recruitment, Jacqui? So you're kind of an outsider.
An insider-outsider.
Yeah, exactly.
25 years in recruitment, so I've seen lots of different companies' cultures and experiences. So absolutely, no, not surprised. I don't want to think, though, that we'd blanket it as a typical Chinese practice or that's typical of Chinese culture. I think we also have to look at, is it a company culture thing? Was that actually at the nub of the issue as opposed to necessarily a Chinese cultural issue?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the question at the heart of it. Did you have just a kind of instant reaction to the piece? Did you think that sounds familiar? Or?
First of all, I think I'm very sympathetic to this situation. I think it's a very particular situation, and I've heard bits and pieces similar things before in the past, but as Jacqui said, I think it's very likely also to be related to that particular, situation around the culture of the organization, right? And also his particular situation, of course, right? But,
yeah, and I think we want to make it clear that in this case, we were talking about Delmas Credle. He worked in China. He's an American, although he was born in South Korea. It kind of brings up particular questions about West versus East, but we do want to make this kind of, be about anyone. So anyone who's ever faced discrimination in the workplace, kind of on grounds of race or gender or anything. So. But I suppose, it would be interesting to look at East versus West. Is there a difference between cultural standards? You've worked in China, and you've also worked for American companies.
Because I started my career in multinational advertising agencies, where everyone meet a lot of different nationalities, different colleagues. And then I moved on to work for the Greater China market for almost 5 years. And then I moved back to work for a US tech company. So kind of feeling, such a big contrast in the work culture and the attitude of when working with different ethnicities. Yeah.
What, can you give us any examples? How is it different in China to outside?
I would say, first of all, I believe everyone is having good intentions, so please do not assume that someone is having some ill intentions. But in general, I think China, the diversity of different races in the working culture and the working environment is less diversified. So the Chinese are more used to working with Chinese, so they feel more comfortable working with Chinese. In a lot of circumstances. So sometimes that's why I think some of the Europeans may find a hard time, I feel like it's hard for me to really get integrated into the work community. So it can be, I would say, a matter of habit of the Chinese workers, but more than ill intentions. So I don't think it's really ill intentions that they're discriminating someone, but they're not used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, because when you talk about East and West, I think that it, in its own is an issue, right? Because I'm from a Western country, originally from New Zealand. I now work across 8 different markets, 5 of which would be classified as Western and 3 would be classified as Eastern. And yet all of those Western markets are different. Culturally, the people are different, the traditions are different. So I'm a New Zealander, I'm now spending time in London. Culture is very, very different. Style is different, yeah? And I think we sometimes lump Asia and talk about it almost as a country as opposed to the differences, you know? So Hong Kong is actually different, quite different to Malaysia. Malaysia is different again to Singapore. There's some similarities, and I'm sure I've never worked in Japan, but I think those who have say it's different again. So I think we have to be careful that we don't put this as an East-West thing. I think it's starting to appreciate that we've been talking now for years about this borderless community, right? That globalisation, you know, we can all move anywhere, we can go and live anywhere. But the fact is, as a result of that and wanting more diverse workforces, we do bring, therefore, different traditions, different cultures, different languages, different ways of operating, and we're trying to force it all to work together. And ultimately, that's what we want. We do want that, because all the proof is in the pudding that the most profitable businesses are the most diverse, no doubt about it. So we have to encourage it, but at the same time, therefore, we've got to be, I think, a bit more prepared for it. What can we do to help prepare people? And be a bit more tolerant. And realise, you know, I can be really honest, in our own business. I just ran a harassment training session in our business in London, and it was coming from a diversity angle, that as we grow as a business, sometimes the stuff that we used to think was really funny and was banter is not okay anymore. Yeah, because there are people from different countries who don't think that's funny. So we have to also appreciate, as we invite people in to our country or to our organisation, and they come from a different part of the world, that we need to adapt as well. Yeah. Because we've invited them here. And if I pick up on the original case, I think, you know, when companies go out and headhunt staff, and we're both in the same line of work, and you deliberately go to another country and you headhunt someone to come and work in your organisation, you too have to walk a little bit further to make that journey comfortable for that person. It can't be all about them just fitting into, because you've asked them to uproot their life, shift countries, bring their family. It's got to be a two-way street, and I don't know that we always do that. And I think as businesses, we have to think of our brand in that piece. What's the experience? Because it doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree with the article and his experience. That's his reality now. His perception is his reality, and that impacts the brand. And we're all in the business of, you know, we all work in the marketing and media sector. Brand and the experience the customer has is critical.
Yeah. How much of a problem do you think this is? I mean, Delmas Credo's case was he was probably one of the only people we've ever heard of speak out in such an honest way. But from both of your experience, do you think this isn't an isolated incident then? You know, it happens all the time, whether people are coming from the West or from within Asia to work in other cultures?
I don't think it's an isolated incident. I mean, you certainly hear of cases like this before. I mean, it's the first time it's been sort of blown up like this, you know, and that in itself, I think, is actually good. I mean, we're talking about it, right? Now, what Jacqui mentioned, and what Rex also said, that her whole East versus West thing. I tend to use this notion, the Wild East, right, versus the Wild West, and I do think the pace of change, say, in China is just extreme. You know, I mean, you have a lot of things going on that you can't really benchmark that in the same way when it comes to, say, the way you look, say, on a CV, right, from a Western context, right? Now, in this particular case, where, of course, they brought in somebody overseas to sort of, I assume, disrupt relevantly. You know, obviously, in hindsight, it didn't work well, right? So you need to learn from this and do it better. I also certainly think that the market in Asia is as diverse as it gets, perhaps even more diverse than Europe. I mean, I'm originally from Denmark, I worked in France, and been in Asia now for a while, and there's certainly a lot of diversity in Europe as well. Russia, I think, has a lot of interesting things going on there from a comms point of view as well. But you think about Asia, Korea, Japan, Thailand, I mean, it's so different when you look at hires and what goes on. And for one to sort of try and group that and sort of trying to sort of take averages out of that is not good, because then you dilute the averages and you don't address the certain issues in question. Right, so I think this is something very specific, perhaps, to this particular situation, and it's dangerous sometimes to draw, say, averages from some particular incidences. You know, but we are learning from it, and I think it's good to be more aware. And it's, you know, induction programs, how you sort of bring in senior talent. It also depends on where you are in your sort of career, whether you are coming in sort of at a younger level in your career or more senior level. Expectations, of course, are different as well. But the whole East versus West, I mean, it's an easy notion to use, and it's something we like to say, but there's a lot of say, separate issues we can talk about in that sort of whole equation, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting ones, of course, right? And that's also why, of course, we talk about it right now.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I think one value in kind of comparing West and East is, in the West we have this really kind of ever getting stronger notion of political correctness, which is kind of like encompasses, you know, I suppose everything, all terms for like, you know, making sure that people are polite to one another, people don't cross those boundaries, and it's you know,
sensitive
yeah, exactly, and you know, a lot of people are saying that that's gone too far in the West, but I mean, do we have that concept as much in Asia, do you think, in countries that you've worked in? Should we have that, or is it, can you not really bring political correctness here in the same way?
I would say there are a lot of like cultural education program also happening in especially Shanghai, in a company there. But you know, China is huge, so it's like now Shanghai is taking the lead to introduce some more cultural program educating how to embrace diversity in the workplace, and hopefully, like other companies in the different tier of cities in China, can also pick that up and put that in a higher priority.
Non-discriminatory.
As I said, I always believe is not really ill-intentioned, so I don't think it's really intentional discrimination. But sometimes if you really need to embrace someone from a different culture, I think first of all is you understand that culture. So what do they like? What do they believe? Are there any taboos? What is their diet? So don't ask any really stupid question in the first encounter. So that I don't offend someone out of because only that I don't understand that culture deep enough. So I believe everything starts from education to learn more about different culture. So this is my point of view. Yeah.
I remember an example. This is many years ago.
Yeah.
I worked for this Danish company in Denmark, France, and Thailand many years ago. And I remember I did this project in Paris.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I was working in the warehouse, right? And I was there for like a month initially. And the first mornings, I mean, people, they came up to me and shook hands, right? And said, hello, nice to meet you. Good morning, how are you? and in certain cases they gave me a bisou as well, right? They kiss on the cheeks, and it was like really interesting. And the second one, I already saw you yesterday. Why are you coming over and shaking hands again, right? And in the evening too, right? They came and shook my hand. I mean, I think it's, first of all, it's French a little to do the bisou. Depends also where you are from in France. But they're very sort of affectionate in a way I was not used to in Denmark. And then shortly after that, I worked in Thailand for a while. I was young, I was 24 or so at that time. And they told me about what to expect and all that. But my first instinct when I walked into the Thai office, the Bangkok office, was to sort of, hello, nice to meet you. And the first females I saw just took their hand back right away, right? Because you don't touch. Right?
Yeah.
And this is years ago, and obviously there's induction programs and all that to be aware of. And it was not because I wanted to be impolite or anything like that, but it lied deeply in me. I mean, just to sort of say politely, hello, right? But I know I actually offended them later, right, by doing what I did. And it was something I learned from, right? And I think today, obviously, I know much more, but I still think it depends on where you are in your career, if you're young and a little more seasoned and all that. But that particular incident, I still think you have a younger staff, although you have globalization and everything is converging, you're knowing more what's happening in different countries and all that. You still inherently will make sometimes things that are considered as politically incorrect, right? Because it lies in you, right? And you just then need to deal with it, of course, right there, right now, because if you don't deal with it in that particular incident, right, it can build up and lead to a lot of other things, right? So perhaps, I don't know, in this particular case that we're referring to, I mean, if something would have happened earlier, in the first 2-3 months or so, if it would have been addressed, I mean, it wouldn't perhaps even have been an issue now, right? I know it's easy to say, but from my own experience back then, I mean, it was something that was brought to my attention right away, I recall, and I learned very well from it.
Were there other things like that you had to just sort of learn as you went along?
Yeah, I mean, back then, because it was a rather large Danish company, and we had offices pretty much everywhere, and I had an opportunity to work with most offices in Latin Europe and all of Asia, right? So I saw this a few times, but I just remember this incident. So I went straight from France to Thailand. It was very different, and how they sort of just worked in the office.
And I think that's the point, though, isn't it? If you do something and you know that, maybe that wasn't right, or you get told later, hey, that's not okay. That's okay. But go and do something about it, go and apologise, say, hey, look, I'm really sorry about that, I wasn't aware, and you fix it up. Because has to be, I understand what you're saying, we are becoming a very politically correct world, but part of me says, is it politically correct, or is it about just starting to appreciate that there's a whole lot of different views out there that we've now got to take into consideration, right? And we've just got to be a little bit more tolerant and a little bit more understanding. At the same time, cut people slack. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do the wrong thing. That's one side of the issue. And I guess it's, if I go back to, as you said, then you moved to Thailand, I think part of it's about our preparedness and how the organisations can help prepare us, and being warts and all honest, So lots of companies, and we see this all the time, they love to sell the sizzle. And I say to them, that's great, but where's the sausage, right? So you've got to give people the warts and all view of joining an organisation or moving to a country or moving to a culture. This is what you're going to experience, so that they can make a more informed decision about those moves too, Because for some of the things that I was experienced in China, were probably some, if we think about it, linguistic issues, right? Going blacker. And someone pointed out, but if my colleague said to me when I got back from Spain, oh, you've got a great tan,
thank you.
I'd be like, yes, I'd be woohoo. So I think it's going, okay, that use of the word blacker now for a lot of people isn't okay, but I actually get that there was no real malicious intent behind that, it was just the wording of it, right? Yeah. That's quite different though than to be bullied in a meeting, not given credit for the work you've done. There were a number of issues in there.
Yeah. That's very true.
And I don't believe you could bundle them up and say, boop, that's China. There will be some of those issues that are actually as a result of the organisation and the culture that they live and breathe every single day. And I don't mean culture as in the ethnic culture, I mean culture as in the organisation's culture.
Yeah.
How well do they encourage new people into an environment? If the leadership team is very stable and it's been, very successful a long time, do they make a real effort when someone new comes into it to encourage their opinion, to make them feel part of the team, So I think we've got to get better at, especially as, we see it every day now, people are moving all over the world. And the trouble is, we love that, don't we? Get excited, oh, I've got a job opportunity in New York, and sometimes we forget to ask the stuff that's actually could be the make or break.
So what would you ask? Because when you're talking about, going for warts in all honesty, which is not, you can't that often ask those questions. Like, you would want to ask, so am I going to have to, what am I going to need to know?
So like when I used to bring people to, if people thought about shifting to Hong Kong when I was living here, I would say, okay, let me tell you what it's going to cost you. Your accommodation is going to cost this. If you think about having children, it's going to cost you this. If your wife thinks she's not going to work, you better be earning a lot of money because this is, and then you say, and I say to people, often used to describe Hong Kong. I hope people don't take offence to this about what I'm going to say. But I'd say if it was an ice cream, it was goody goody gumdrop, right? Because there was lots of different things about it. It's very rural country. What you see is what you get. It's exciting. And so I would tell them there's the good and bad. It can look like it's a really dirty environment out there, but it's got this amazing vibe to it. You give them everything you know so they can make an informed decision.
Did you say that about a company? It's one specific company?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to give them as much as possible because there's no perfect company out there. As there's no perfect employee. We've all got things that we're great at and things that we're not so good at. Companies are the same, and I think we've got to get real. We keep using this lovely word, authentic, but the reality is there's not many of us out there. So many organisations really want to present an authentic image. We want to dress it up so it looks nice and, that presents nicely. But what's the reality? The reality is, hey, you know what, these guys do work long hours, or they are quite a tight-knit bunch, but once you get in there, this is what you can expect. Then you make a better informed decision. Because the cost of change and the cost of this, someone leaving your organisation and having a bad experience, as we know now in the day of, we're all in a social environment, right, and digital environment. We used to, if before that, we'd have a bad experience, we'd tell our 10 friends and they might tell 2 or 3, right? Now someone goes on social media, be it Twitter or Facebook or any other form, and go there, and it goes out to everybody. So we've got to start being more real, so we try and address those issues before they happen. It's not going to be, it's not perfect because of course things are going to happen. Discrimination is happening everywhere, everywhere. We did the woman leading change thing earlier this year. We saw some of those stats. It's in New Zealand, it's in Australia, it's in New York, it's in the UK. It's not just happening in China. The focus might be on different things. Is it ethnicity? Is it age? Is it gender? What is it?
And building up on that, I think a more constructive way of improving the situation is like embrace the culture, but not telling people no discrimination. That's a rule only, right? I think the core of it is how to really embrace and appreciate different cultures and then get yourself assimilated with it. So I think there's nobody's fault. I think we just need to get really systematic. So put it in the regimen of every company, like every company should have a springboard or cultivation program to help different cultures mix together. I think it's not really a universal and systematic thing, at least at this moment, not for every company, and hopefully it will change in the near future.
I was just thinking as well, because I also think with social media and all this going on, of course, there's the danger or the opportunity to bring something small to everybody's attention really fast, right? And I recall this CEO some time ago of a big agency in Japan telling me the whole Me Too thing going on and all that. Now he's very conscious about how he sort of interacts with people, right? And then he was sort of, he is, very sort of embracing and sort of very affectionate, right? And he's very conscious of not, cross any boundaries or perceived boundaries, right? And I still think you need to be who you are, right? I mean, back to being authentic, right, and not trying to pretend being something else. But it does because of social media. I mean, there's a challenge at times where it can bring something small. It can blow it up really fast, right? But me too, absolutely. I still think it's all good and all that, but you do need to sort of also be sort of rational and just sensible about it as well, right? But I still think we work in an industry, communication, marketing, creatives. I mean, it's all about emotions, right? I mean, emotion creates emotion. I mean, you need to move, right? You can't just sit and be stalled and not show your emotions, right?
Yeah.
But within reason, right? And you need to be sensitive to the culture in question, and culture meaning the corporate culture and the country culture, right?
Yeah. Do you think that this is an industry problem? I mean, we just saw this survey that came out earlier today. I think it was based on it was done by the Australian Human Rights Commission. It said that sexual harassment is more prevalent in the media industry than any other industry in Australia. That's obviously, you know, one specific subject of research, but I think one of the people who commented on this article said that they think it is specific to the industry, and the advertising industry is one of the least intolerant, and whether you're a foreigner or not, then its intolerance exists. Do you think, is it a problem of this industry, and maybe it's because it's facing a lot of pressures? Is it worse in kind of communications and advertising than others?
I don't know that it's worse than others. If I look in New Zealand, we've had major problems recently in our legal sector, ironically, and they should know better than anybody because they're living and breathing it every day. So, you know, I don't know that it's worse. Is it alive and well in the media and advertising space? Absolutely, yeah. And I think maybe, you know, it's taken some of these bigger, you know, and #MeToo, it's taken that to get the conversation going. Whether it's right or wrong, it's taken that to get people talking about it and suddenly stopping to think and becoming a little bit more conscious about what do we do and what do we say and is it okay? And it's not just sexual harassment, it's bullying, it's discrimination. I found when I first came to Hong Kong, I found in Malaysia and Singapore relatively ageist in their approach, especially in the media and advertising industry. You know, I would hear time and time again, don't want to see anybody over 32, don't want to see anybody over 35, don't want to see anybody over 40. And I'm sitting there and I'm putting it out there for the world, I'm 47. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, so I'm literally past it according to all you people, you know? Yeah. And there wasn't any really necessarily great reasoning for that thinking. You know, sometimes it could be, but the CEO's only 35, so we can't have anybody older than him. So it's there, it's everywhere. I don't think the industry is any worse per se than others, but I think we would be foolish to believe it's not there. It is absolutely alive and well.
Yeah. Okay.
It's more visible. I mean, it's just much more visible industry than you working R&D for some, I don't know, very chemical-oriented proposition, right, which doesn't get the kind of media attention than you know, the creative industries are getting, right? Yeah. So problem, yes, right, but it's good that I still think it's always something that, I mean, we need to put ourselves in positions where we can make, as you said, informed and educated decisions, and that comes from talks, information, right, and that wouldn't have come about if we are not bringing it up, right, but I think the key words are informed and educated decisions, right, and of course emotions are always going to be involved, like in this case as well. Right, but I still like to think diversity. We want diversity. Absolutely. Right, we want that. Gender, age, sex, everything. Right. Yeah. You want that healthy friction as well. I think, right? Because you set up a team. I mean, if you're all like me or like you, right? Boring. I mean, the ideas that come out of it are the same. We need synergies. We need healthy friction, right? And that comes from making, you know, good hires, right? Casting a good team, right? A diverse team,
but everyone at the same time in that team needs to know where the lines are,
Of course.
what's acceptable and what's not.
And the beauty of it is that it differs from that corporate culture in question and that country culture in question, right? And it's so easy for me to say, but you use this, I always say this, the proof is in the pudding, right? Because you can talk about it, but can you do it, right? And certain organizations are of course better at doing it than others, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have a question here actually from our Facebook, which says, should HR departments at multinationals be judged differently from domestic counterparts? Because I suppose at the multinationals they're a lot bigger, they've got a lot more firepower, or should it be the same no matter how big and small or global or local you are?
Look, I think you've got to go for trying to get it aligned as possible, right? It's not an excuse to be a 7-person organisation and treat people like crap. But it doesn't sit with HR. That's the point I want to make. It sits with the CEO. Yeah, really, really clearly. If you're trying to drive a diversity and inclusion program through HR, it's probably not going to be successful, right? It's got to come from the top. The CEO has to embrace it and want to see it drive through the organisation. Now, HR might be a great vehicle to take those messaging and do some of the education work, but it's got to come from the top. So if it was because let's face it, if it's a 20-person organisation, you probably won't have HR. You're probably not going to have someone dedicated to HR. And what I've seen quite often in organisations that size, when I've travelled around different Asian countries, they have been more of an administrative function. So they're sorting out your sick leave, your holiday pay, paying salaries. They're not an expert in culture, organisation and development, L&D, that sort of stuff. So it shouldn't sit there.
Yeah.
It would still sit, if it's a 20-person organisation, to my mind, if I look at my own business when I set up, I set the tone. Yeah. If I think it's okay to abuse people, my team are going to think that's okay behaviour because that's what they're seeing being modelled. So it's got to come from the top down. It really, really does. Yeah.
Do you think that's true, Rex? Do you think how much of an influence can the top person have on everyone else?
Actually, quite a lot, I would say. Like Jacqui suggested, for the smaller company, usually the HR may be playing a different role. So, but in other words, you can also say that maybe the CEO, the general manager, is taking up the HR responsibilities as well of the multicultural organizations. So, I would say every company would really want to get the best talent, no matter what's their sexual orientation, ethnicities, everything. So, if you really want to get the best talent, and then I think the top person should really take the responsibility to ensure the environment, the communication space, everyone can be vocal about their diversity. So I think it's really important. I think no one should be able to really escape from that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So just in terms in general of what can be done about this. So we're saying that the needs to come from the top down. Every individual who's moving to a different culture needs to kind of be aware, I guess, and they could probably be helped in that by the company that they're moving to. Recruitment companies have a role to play as a kind of intermediary because you can say it real, I guess.
Absolutely.
And the companies themselves need to be aware that this is a problem. Like I suppose from our perspective, reporting on the industry, we hear a lot of very positive, everything's great, we've got our diversity policy in place, but obviously, things like this do happen and do go wrong. So do we need more of, do employees of any level or age need to be able to know exactly where they can go to report things like this if they are unhappy?
Right, be vocal and you should still be safe in a company.
And are you at the moment? Could you do that at the moment? Not necessarily in your company now, but...
I think fortunately for every company I worked for before, actually you can be really vocal about who you are, like what you believe in, should be fine. But I'm not surprised that there are still companies less struggling about that. So, but going back to the top-down or bottom-up question, I want to add an additional remark about that. It's an interesting question, like instead of top-down, if it's a bottom-up influence, so how big can that be? A lot of insurance companies out there, banks, they are like forming like committees, like having their employees sitting at the board level, like talking about what is the company culture, what kind of value we're pursuing. So I think it's a really good trend. Like the bottom-up influence is also really getting bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've seen that a lot as well.
Right.
Just talking about mixing people from different backgrounds together and seeing where that leads in terms of good business.
I just thought of something else as well when you were reading the question. Was that asked by an HR professional? Do you know?
It
Or was
was
it just-
actually, this
Okay.
doesn't relate who.
No, because I was just
Right.
thinking, because a lot of these there's going to be more focus on the HR function per se, without doubt, right? And you have, talent acquisition roles coming up left, right, and center. You have learning, development. You have but HR is still tiny. It's been for a long time, I think, in Asia, relative to where I came from.
Yeah.
Right, and there'll be a need, I think, certainly for much more, I think, expertise in around, in around HR, because HR is still, especially HR in agencies per se, is still very, in my humble point of view, very operational, very tactical.
Yeah.
Right. You go to the client side though, it's much more strategic.
Absolutely.
Right, and if you look at the headcount of HR per say perceived revenue making staff on the client side, right? You have many more HR staff, right?
Yeah.
They make money on the agency side as well, but you're not allocating a lot of, say, HR headcount, right? So it's a conundrum, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of opportunity. Obviously, recruiters will help as well, right? And I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but you can retain much better than you're doing right now, especially on the agency side, with better HR.
Yeah. One more question here, which is a good one. It's from Harriet Gaywood on Facebook. She says, the effects of bullying can last for years. Do you think agencies have a responsibility to victims of workplace bullying once they've officially left the company?
It's a big topic really, and it could be an entire conversation on its own. I think there is an element of it. If I look at, I'll just give you a slightly different example, but hopefully there's some alignment to it. If I look in New Zealand, we pay a levy for every employee, what we call accident compensation. So it's health and safety. And so if they have an injury in your workplace, and they can't work to the full potential or can't work at all, you will continue to pay and contribute to that for some time. I think what Harriet might be touching on here is that long-term impact, and because that can lead into mental health issues, anxiety, etc. So we do have a duty of care, I think, as employers, to create an environment where people are not experiencing bullying and harassment and having to feel like they can't say what they think or being highly anxious and all of those sorts. We do have a responsibility for that because we hire them.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got to create the right environment. So if we have knowingly, and that's the hard question to sometimes answer, knowingly gone out of way to do things that have created that, then we're probably going to have to put our hands up. Now, that will depend on each country and the legislation, I guess, that governs employment and what they do. But I don't know that as a business owner that I would sleep very well at night knowing that I have created an environment that somebody has felt bullied in and is going home or chooses to leave me for that reason. We would need to take a good hard look at ourselves and say, what are we going to do to prevent that happening again?
Yeah.
I think prevention needs to be our focus more so than cure, because I think this is about getting those topics on the table. Gosh, things that we thought were okay before, look, I started in recruitment so long ago, people used to smoke at the desk in those days and they'd interview candidates. Everything changes and everything moves along, and some of us move fast and some of us slower. We can't afford to move at the pace we're moving at the moment. We can't say, oh, it's great, we've got 0.5% more women on boards now, or 0.2% less people getting sexual harassment. It's not quick enough.
Yeah.
I can't remember which of these lovely gentlemen said before, the pace of change is so fast now, but we're not keeping up with that in some of our practices, and so we need to do that so that we take a more preventative approach than having to be at the other end of the stat.
Yeah. Okay, I've got one more question here and then I think we'll finish up, but it says, healthy friction sounds good, but by definition, it means people might get offended from time to time.
Yeah.
How do companies encourage that friction while teaching people where the lines are and ensuring things don't go too far, which ends up talent leaving? Should the carrot or stick approach be better? And do you have any specific examples of companies that handle it well? So, yeah, how do you encourage healthy friction without it going too far?
I have a really interesting example to share. So just a small one, while I still worked for the advertising agency. So we need to craft an illustration of a businessman wearing a suit and tie. So I was working with my Indian colleagues. So he said, no, the tie and the shirt should be really bright colors. I said, no. And that's not I used to see. So I said, no, maybe dark blue and black. So we just had a discussion about the colors. A really heated up discussion. So, but I think at the end of the day, so why we are having different perception, different judgment criteria on the color of the shirt is because we are coming from different culture. We grew up in different cultures. And how do we solve it? And then finally, we just ask ourselves to be really professional. So who are seeing this advertisement? Who will be seeing this illustration? So neither of them come from India, neither of them come from Hong Kong or China. So I think really stay true to the project, be professional, knowing what is the objective. And of course, there is a really fine line to, I think we should all remind ourselves no personal attack. Don't get the argument to be too personal. So that's one of my experience.
It's a really good point you make.
Yeah.
Because diverse opinion you want, and we want some conflict, right? Because that creates healthy, better solutions because you're debating and you ultimately get a better outcome when that happens. Kiwis, we're naturally conflict avoidant. Right? So we'll go to a restaurant, we'll have a terrible meal, they'll say, how was it? And we go, great, and leave, and then it's not. So I think we've got to try and educate people. Our littlies coming through the education system, it's okay to disagree, yeah? But picking up on your point is, you don't then attack the person personally, yeah? It's not because you're a stupid Kiwi that's happened. It's no, this is just, I disagree with you, and it's okay to disagree, yeah? I think companies... Good managers, I think, more so than even just companies, encourage it by sometimes the manager playing the devil's advocate. So if you know that you're probably guilty in some organisations of groupthink because you all think the same, throwing in the complete opposite opinion and going, but what if we did da-da-da? And it's like, oh, okay. And keeping conversation open rather than shutting it down when a different opinion comes through, even if you're thinking in your heart of hearts, well, that's not going to work. Encouraging it so that it sends a message to the business, a different viewpoint is okay. And as long as it doesn't become personal or offensive, then you're probably going to be safe. Yeah. And having a maturity that says we can walk out of here and 9 of us, agree, and 1 doesn't. But that's what we're going to do as a company because that's the commitment to the end goal. Yeah. It doesn't mean I like you any less. It just means in that particular issue I didn't agree with your opinion. But it takes some maturity. And again, it takes the leaders in the business to say that that's okay to disagree and that's okay to have good, robust debate.
Yeah, but there has to be room for personalities as well, but it's just avoiding those personal attacks. I think that's what is at the heart of this article, that he really felt like it was a personal thing against him.
Absolutely.
For reasons that were beyond his control.
And that's tough. When you think it becomes personal, it's very hard to step back and see it differently.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks all so much for joining us. You can still carry on leaving comments and questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. But thank you all so much to my guests. Thank you, Rex and Jacqui and Leo, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Till next time, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.